One of the hardest things about becoming a jazz improviser is going from scales and arpeggios and patterns and things like that into actual music. So what I'm going to try and do today is show you like 5 really simple little devices that can just lift your playing, can start to inject some actual bebop phraseology into it. The only problem is after you've gone through this video, you're going to start hearing these things absolutely everywhere. Hello, welcome to Jazz Guitar Scrapbooks. So, if you are interested, there's a PDF link in the description below that you can follow, and I'll have everything that's in this video and maybe a few other bits as well for you to look at. So check that out. Anyway, these 5 little things I'm going to show you today, they're just little simple motifs of like, maybe 3 notes or something like that. Not very long, maybe even 1 note. But they're things that can lift your lines to make them sound more stylistic. These are things that I might have taken from lines that are transcribed in solos or bebop heads. It's always a good source of language. Some of these concepts come to me from Barry Harris, although for this video I'm not really going to talk that much about the Barry Harris approach. This is more about stuff that you can plonk on scales and arpeggios that you've already got going for you and start to add a bit of bebop style to what you're already doing. At least that's the idea. So I put everything into C major, A minor-ish, just to try and make it a little bit easy to access and transpose and everything. And I'm also going to try and walk you through some examples of how I might go about using these, as well as maybe playing you some examples from the recordings. So let's get on. So our first device is the simplest. It's just 1 note, and this is the chromatic neighbour tone. It goes in before anything that starts on the beat, on the and before it, right? So if we take something like a G7 arpeggio, but it could be a scale or anything, but let's take a G7 arpeggio, and this is an 8th notes, 1 and 2, and we put in the half step on the and before it, so the and of the 4 previous bar, 1, 2, 3, 4. It instantly adds some swing. Now it's really common with this motif to see things that are in triplets, so you have the and with the lower chromatic neighbour, and then the arpeggio, or chord as Barry Harris would call it, becomes a triplet and that ends up on 2. So for instance, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 and 2. And this is often on the and of 1. So 1 and 2 and 3. Yeah? And you see that a lot actually. So for instance, or that kind of stuff, right? So it's a really common little feature of bebop lines, and that's something you can put in right away. You might even think it's a little bit of a cliche, but it's a good way to get triplets into your lines, which are, an important part of the bebop phrasing. It's not all 8th notes. And you can do it with a scale as well. So for instance, if I take this scale up to the 7th, I can go 1, 2, 3, 4. It kind of adds a bit of swing to the whole thing. I like to slur it as well. That adds swing too. So if I'm slurring the upbeat note into the following tone on the beat, that does add a bit of swing. We're using the F sharp on a G7 chord, which doesn't normally have an F sharp in it. And it doesn't really matter because this note is a sort of just a little tension note. It's not actually meant to have anything to do with the chord. And there's loads of lines which use this. Here's Night in Tunisia. And then there's, Old Milestones. Yeah. Here's a nice example from Charlie Parker's solo on Moose the Mooch. That goes to the C7 and the B flat, right? So it's a really great little thing just to kick off a line. I mean, I use it like this all the time. So for instance, I've got like D7, it's like that kind of stuff, right? It's a very obvious way to inject some rhythmic interest in your playing. Our next device is this little thing which is sometimes called an enclosure, a 4-note enclosure. Or in Barry Harris land, it's called a 4th phrase because it starts on the 4th. We're in C major, for instance, it starts on the F, which is the 4th of C major. And we play this as sort of half step above the 3rd. We're going towards the 3rd, and we go on that note, and then 2 chromatic notes up from the 2 to the 3rd. It's quite bluesy. Now this is absolutely everywhere. For instance, if I play, there's a Grant Green lick that I had a couple of videos ago, and that has it in it. It's going from C7 to F7. That's from his solo one, Miss Anne's Tempo, for instance. I've transposed it to our key. Here's another little lick from Wes Montgomery, spoken at the half note on 4/6. He plays this thing, going from the G7 altered to a C major. And the whole phrase goes. Yeah. Very nice little phrase as well. So it's a very slick way to get into a chord. And if I just take this, around the G7, and then we can go, we'll do that, and we end up on the fourth, you notice, F, right? So we'll just put that in as well. We get this. And just using those two devices, we have already invented some bebop. We've got the half step below the G7, doing the triplet, and that's a way into C major. And we just prep that by using the 4 phrase around the 3rd of G7. Right? So that's how you do it. This is also a useful thing to put around the 5th of the minor chord. So the relative minor of C major is A minor, like this. It works very nicely there. And we can have a look at this line from the head of Billy's Bounce, for instance, transposed to our key. So very nice little 2-5-1 lick there. It starts on the natural 5th of the 2 chord, actually, which is nice. I mean, there's no reason not to do that. It's in the minor scales, in the melodic minor and Dorian mode. So if you have to think about it that way. And then around the 3rd of the E7. Here's a nice example where we're going to swap that minor version going to the 5 into C major to create this sort of like slightly altered effect. And this is a Charlie Parker lick, and it sounds like this. Now, if I was playing around with that idea, improvising, I might go I could do a little diminished thing there, so 1, 2, like that, for instance. So that's another way of using this device. It's extremely useful. You get it all over. Look out for it everywhere. Yeah, these are just 4 examples, but there's millions more. Right, our next little device is the Chromatic walk down. This is a 3-note device, and it basically just puts a passing tone in between 2 notes separated by a whole step. This is most commonly used between the root and the 7th of a dominant 7th chord. So for instance, we've got the G7 here. We go like that, for instance, which is me going from 1 passing tone, flat 7, yeah? And probably some of you are thinking right away about the so-called bebop scale or the Barry Harris added note rules. This is part of it, but actually you can just use it with an arpeggio. This is actually a very old school thing. There's a nice little example from Louis Armstrong. Yeah, and that's got that sort of old school New Orleans-y traditional jazz sort of sound to it, right? And here's a little phrase from Charlie Parker's solo on Moose the Mooch, which I also covered a couple of videos ago. Same device. This time we're going from C major to C7, like setting up a move to 4. So it's like this, with this the C major scale. Like Louis Armstrong, he just arms, that's the way I put it, arms that chord into being a dissonant dominant chord wanting to move at the end, right? And you could use the Louis Armstrong thing in the same context. And then use the 4 phrase around F, for instance. Let's see if that works with the Charlie Parker thing. Yeah, it's a little bit ba-doo-dee, ends up on the upbeat, but it works. Let me try it again. And then we're using that in concert with the 4 phrase, because if we move from C7 on the flat 7, that becomes the 4th of F major. So that's useful. Maybe I could put it in our sort of omnibus line that we've been inventing on G7 going to C major. So this thing, C, yeah, I just put that in at the beginning and it sounds pretty cool. It's amazing how just a few little devices can start to reap results very quickly. A nice little example from the rock world is this phrase from Larry Carlton's solo on Kid Charlemagne. It's this, which is obviously very bebop-y. It's like the main sort of bebop-y lick in that solo, actually. The truffle oil that makes it sound like jazz, I guess, to rock listeners. And that's actually happening on the B-flat 7 chord, so it's more like a 2 down to 1. Don't worry about it too much. But that little phrase obviously gives us that jazz vibe right away, which is probably why Larry Carlton played it as a little bit of a wink. We're also not limited to putting this at the end of phrases. We can put it in the middle of phrases or at the beginning. So here's a nice little example from Wes Montgomery. Yeah, that's from Nika's Dream. I use this phrase all the time, ad nauseum. I'm going to do it on G7. That thing. I use it a lot as a launcher for phrases. So you can put it at the beginning as well. And of course you have this thing, which people call the bebop scale. But you could also term a Barry Harris added notes rules scale. I find it hard to say sometimes. But whatever you call it, that comes up in loads of lines as well. So this is quite a big one. Now you can also use it to fill in between a 5th and a 6th on a major or minor chord. It works for either. And here's a little example from Charlie Christian that uses 2 chromatic fill-in notes like this. And this is from his solo on Rose Room. Yeah? Actually, it almost has more of an F7 sort of sound to it. So if we did this in G7, it'd be that. Not unlike the Larry Carlton lick, actually, with that run down to the 1. Yeah, so there you go. Larry Carlton and Charlie Christian, not that far apart. So this is my favourite, actually, of these ones. This is a way of injecting a little bit of altered spice into your 2-5-1 lines. And the easiest way of doing this is actually, it's kind of just moving into the minor almost, because we're just going to add in 2 notes from the minor key, moving into C major, and that one's, in this case, B flat and A flat, or the flat 7 and flat 6. Now from the point of view of G7, that's sharp 9, believe it or not, and flat 9. It's part of the melody of Green Dolphin Street, which is this. Let's see that we go, if I put the chord shapes underneath it. Get that kind of flat 9, sharp 9 altered sound, kind of without actually using the altered scale at all. It's kind of just swapping the minor in. If we lock those in, we can have a 4th phrase, which by the way is this Wes Montgomery lick. And some C major stuff afterwards, right? So that's just a straight rundown. You could just go down to the 3rd like that without using the 4th phrase. This is something that comes up in Donna Lee, for instance, using that. You can think of that as a G7 from the 3rd, or a B diminished triad. And this sort of triplety thing is very common. You see that sort of thing a lot. So that's a phrase that I use a lot. I'll put it in minor as well, so it's useful to have it in minor. Now where it gets kind of interesting is if we add in the major 3rd of this as well. So we can add in the B as well as the B flat and the A flat and the G. And then when we do that, we get something which is called a diminished tetrachord. It's a half step, a whole step, and a half step. And if you obviously keep going with that pattern, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, etc., you end up with the diminished scale. But we're not going to talk about that today, so we're just interested in this. You also find out in the altered scale if you're into that sort of thing. Whatever, doesn't matter. These are the notes: B, B flat, A flat, G. Here's an example from Hot House. Okay. Those are little trills in there. It's lovely, and that's just using this. And then goes into major after that, right? So that's interesting because it's not really the altered scale. Just to illustrate that point, I'd like to show you this little line, this little pattern that Wes Montgomery plays at the end of the first A section of his live solo on Nika's Dream. And at first I thought it was this. etc., right? Which is C natural minor, but actually plays this. And so on, right? It doesn't complete the pattern. And he's going up, instead of going up to the C, he's going up to the B. So it's this diminished tetrachord again. Something like that, right? But it kind of shows how just by changing one note, by moving the root down to the leading tone, moving the 1 down to the major 7th, you create this interesting altered version of the minor scale. And I've talked about this a bit before in terms of like the Lee Morgan scale. I'll put a link to the video up where we take the pentatonic scale, we add in the major 7th there. Yeah? And this is kind of like a 7-note version of that. So this is a great way into altered dominant sounds if you haven't quite got your ears around the altered scale. And to be honest, a lot of the older players don't really play the altered scale that much. Right, so the last motif is the bebop phrase. It actually gave the genre of music its name. And this is like 2/8 notes, and usually it's on the 5th and the 3rd of the major key. So bebop, like that, right? And this is the main motif for The Head of Groovin' High by Dizzy Gillespie. In C major, the original's in E flat. Just shift it up some frets. But that's a really nice little phrase for finishing off things. Here's an example from Charlie Parker from his solo on Moose the Mooch. He does this. We came across that earlier, right? Bebop, bebop. I could put that, for instance, if I was doing my bebop, I heard a bebop with my little whatchamacallit, the diminished tetrachord, or a fancy name, where you go bebop. For instance, you could do it there. It's a nice way to end a phrase. Now, it doesn't always have to be on those notes. For instance, at the end of the first day section of Hot House, we have bebop, and it's a little bit more syncopated. Da da. It's not bebop. It's ba ba. Comes on the end of 4. Bebop, but it's still bebop, right? In the minor key, having a bebop that goes on the root and the 6th is really nice. So there's this phrase from Coleman Hawkins that Barry Harris taught us, which goes like this. Bebop, there at the end, right? There's a nice phrase from Wes Montgomery. And this one from Grant Green is a little bit different because we end up on the 2 and the 6, which actually creates a tritone, which can work as well. So bebop, which is a really cool little thing, very beboppy, the flat 5. Yeah? Just a very short phrase, but absolutely killing. So I thought I could do a nice little omnibus phrase, just using the devices we have already. So lower neighbour with the triplet, 4 phrase, on the G7 this is, walk down to the 7th, and then that little diminished tetrachordy altered thing, bebop. So, there you go. There's a line just using the devices covered in this video. So you can see how powerful they are, even just these 5. I hope that sorts you out for stylistic little bebop motifs. As I say, post your favourites below if you have any. Hopefully I've demonstrated a little bit how we can use these things to come up with phrases of our own, as well as where they are in the actual recorded music. As I say, there's hundreds of examples of these, and you're going to be listening to music now and hearing things and going like, oh yeah, I know that phrase, if you play these things enough, which is kind of how ear training works, as quiet as it's kept. These are schemata, little shapes that your ear will key into. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Leave any comments below.